Hey boys and girls, here is half of chapter 11 of The Frog Princess. Because we had arrived at the witch's cottage shut inside our musty sack, I'd had no idea that Vannaby had carried us from the swamp into the forest until I saw the towering trees that ringed the clearing. As Edric and I passed the first weathered trunks, I realized that I hadn't the faintest clue which way we should go. Tall trees blocked the sunlight, leaving the forest floor dark and gloomy. We passed beneath an old oak, hopping over its gnarled roots and carpet of decayed leaves from the years past. "This place is spooky," I said, glancing over my shoulder. "I like the dark," said a voice, and we looked up to see Lil, hanging from a branch, huddled against the trunk of the tree. "It makes me feel safer. I think I was born somewhere around here, although I don't remember it very well." "I have no idea how to reach the castle from here," I said. "Do you think you could fly above the trees and see if you can find it? That would help ever so much." "If you really want to, I suppose I could go look, but it's awfully bright up there." "If you don't mind. It's the only castle around with green pennants flying from the turrets. You can't miss it." Lil nodded. "I'll be right back." We watched her flap her wings and fly between the branches in fits and starts. "Does she seem nervous to you?" Edric asked. "Very," I said, "but you can't blame her. This is the first time she's been outside since she was a baby. I think it would be frightening for her. So much of it will be new. And her flying, give her some time. Don't forget that she's been tethered to a rafter most of her life. I doubt she's been able to do much flying." "I have to set this down," Edric said, placing the vial on the ground and rolling his shoulders to work out the kinks in his muscles. "That vial is heavier than it looks. Of course, if you kissed me again, I might have enough energy to haul it around some more." I sighed and shook my head. "I don't understand. Why do you keep asking for a kiss?" Edric shrugged. "Habit, I guess." "Well, I guess I'm in the habit of saying no." "Rejected again," he said, quirking up one corner of his mouth in a half smile. "I must admit, I'm getting used to it." Leaves rustled as a squirrel darted along the branch of a tree. We both glanced up, and I, at least, felt very small, dwarfed by the immensity of the forest. The trees where we stood were ancient, their trunks so thick that I couldn't have put my arms around them even when I was a human. Broken branches littered the ground, and here and there we could see where one of the mature trees had fallen, exposing a patch of the forest floor to the sun. Young saplings were quick to grow in such spots, greedily seeking their share of the sunlight. With our backs to the meadow, the forest seemed to go on forever. It would be easy to get lost in such a place. "You know," said Edric, "it might be a real help to have your bat friend with us. If she can scout ahead, she should be able to keep us going in the right direction." "Even if she weren't able to help us, I couldn't have left her behind. No one deserved to be left in that awful place." "I am glad you think so," breathed a voice that sent a chill up my spine. I turned my head toward the sound. Dead leaves whispered beneath the biggest snake that I had ever seen. 4 black stripes ran down his gray and white body. A streak of black accented one eye. I froze, unable to move as the snake stared into my eyes. "What is wrong?" breathed the snake. "Do you not recognize me?" "Are you Fang?" I asked through a throat tight with fear. "At your service," the snake hissed, coiling his length under him. "You mentioned your destination. I believed that you could use my company." "Why would we want you along?" Edric asked, his voice quivering. The snake swung his head around to face my friend, looking up and down as if appraising his next meal. "Because I know what lives in this forest. Witches have lived here for centuries, and the spillover from their magic has changed even the trees themselves. But you need not fear the magical beings, for they will see you as an animal and therefore one who belongs. Still, you would have not made it through without me, for your indiscretions will soon attract the attention of predators. Without my protection, your journey is doomed before you begin." Great, I thought. Even the snake's a critic. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and tried my best to look brave. "So you're not going to eat us?" "I do not eat creatures who have helped me. You freed me from a cage so small I feared I would soon go insane. I owe you far more than I can repay by a simple trip through the forest. No, I swear upon my honor as a snake that I shall not eat you." Fang dipped his head to me in a gesture both elegant and noble. It was up to me to set an example. I resolved not to let anyone see either my fear or my revulsion I felt about being around a snake. Does that include my companions too? Of course I will. Snake! Snake! Shrieked Lil, flitting back and forth just above our heads. Look out, frogs! That's Fang, and he's going to get you. What can I do? What can I do? The poor bat was frantic, and I began to worry that she might injure herself in frenzy. Apparently, I wasn't the only one concerned, but the snake was more disapproving of the commotion than he was worried about her well-being. Would you be so kind as to do something about Lil? Fang said in a voice that made my skin crawl. She's drawing too much attention to us. If you don't stop her immediately, I shall. I couldn't watch my friend risk her life, but trusting a snake went against all my instincts. Setting aside my misgivings, I waved my arms frantically above my head and shouted as loudly as I could, Lil, no, he's a friend. I hoped it was the truth. Lil veered away in a mid-flight and landed on the ground behind Edric. Has Emma lost her mind? She whispered. How could any snake be her friend? Fang says he owes her a debt, so he's going with us. He promises not to eat us. And are you sure you can be trusted? He was always very polite, but he never seemed to want to be anyone's friend. How do we know this isn't a trick? From what I've heard, snakes are pretty sneaky characters. What do you suggest we do about it? Whispered Edric. He's bigger than the rest of us put together. I don't think it would do any good to tell him not to come. Maybe, said Lil, but we can keep an eye on him. We'll take turns watching him tonight. I'll take the first watch. You won't need to wake me when it's my turn, Edric said. I won't be able to sleep with him around anyway. What are you two talking about? I asked, although I'd already heard their conversation and feared that Fang had as well. I hopped closer to my friends while Fang raised his head and stared at them through slitted eyes. Nothing, said Lil, in a tiny voice as she noticed Fang was watching her. She crouched down to hide between Edric until all I could see were the tips of her wings. I was about to show Edric my twine. It's my only possession, and I couldn't leave it behind. You risked your life for a piece of twine? I exclaimed. Lil peeked out from behind Edric. That wasn't the only reason I stayed. I moved the book so Vannaby wouldn't know what we'd done. Anyway, the string will be really useful. We can tie the dragon's breath to someone's back with it. Here, she said, handing it to Edric. Edric examined the coarse brown string, turning it over in his hands. Fine, tie it to my back. At least that way, my arms won't get tired anymore. If you have finished your conversation, may I suggest that we move on? Hissed Fang. You are wasting daylight hours. At the sound of Fang's voice, Lil ducked down behind Edric again. I saw the castle. I can show you how to get there, she whispered. That would be a big help, I said, trying to be encouraging. Fang, said Edric, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if you went in front of Emma and me. Excellent thinking, said the snake. I'll scoot ahead for any trouble. Lil took off, and the snake watched to see where she headed before slithering off into the leaf litter. It was up to me to tie the vial to Edric's back. Although frogs can do many things with their fingers, tying knots is not one of them. You'd think 4 fingers would be enough to tie a knot, I said, fumbling with the twine. But these things just don't work the same as human fingers do. I wish Mo were here. He was the one who knew all about knots. Who's Mo? Edric asked. Not another friend of yours. You collect friends like black tunics collect dandruff. I sighed. I'd forgotten that Edric had slept through the entire day. Never mind, I told him. Someday I'll tell you all about everything you missed while you were asleep. But right now, you can tell me something. What are you and Lil up to? Lil and I don't trust the snake, and we want to keep an eye on him. I wouldn't want him behind us anyway. Who knows when he might get tired of watching such tempting morsels hopping right along under his nose. A promise is easy to forget when you're hungry. He was hungry when he left the cottage. If he wanted to eat us, wouldn't he have done it already? My dear princess, you are awfully naive, or perhaps I should say that you're too trusting. You think that everyone is going to be your friend until you learn otherwise. Look who's talking. You're the one who ate the witch's worm. But you're wrong, you know. I didn't trust you at first. Then you trust everyone but me. That's not true. I trust you now. Good. But you still shouldn't trust the snake. I don't think we need him, despite what he says. You don't think we're in danger in these woods? I think the biggest danger we'll face just invited himself along. I don't know. These woods are awfully creepy. I can't wait to get through them and back into the sunlight. I looked up at the leafy canopy. Lil flew off periodically to check our progress, then returned to keep us headed in the right direction. However, we saw little of Fang for the rest of the day. He scouted ahead as he said he would, and if he came across anything dangerous, he didn't tell us about it. We saw some strange sights as we traveled, things that would be attributed only to magic. Trees seemed to move in the most untree-like ways, bending with a fluid grace to lean toward neighbors, the rustle of their leaves almost sounding like words. I swore I saw one pull up its roots and move into a patch of sunlight, but when we reached the spot, the roots looked as if they'd been growing there for years. We'd been traveling through the woods for a few hours when the ground began to shake and we heard the thudding footsteps of a large creature. Although the noise grew increasingly loud, distance and dense foliage kept the thing hidden from sight. Suddenly, there was a tremendous crash, followed by the shriek of splitting wood. The trees around us shuddered in sympathy, raining leaves like emerald teardrops. I jumped to avoid the falling twig, but the ground wasn't where I thought it would be, and I landed in a depression nearly twice my height. Emma, what happened? Are you all right? Edric's shout made me cringe, for he had been loud, and I knew the sound would carry. Shh, I whispered. Not so loud. I'm down here. Edric's face appeared over the edge of the hole, peering down at me with a look of such concern that I immediately regretted scolding him. Let me help you, he said, extending his hand to take mine. You don't need to do that, I said, backing up a few steps. I think I can make it. Watch out. I tensed my legs and was about to leap when the ground shook with such force that the sides of the hole began to crumble, dropping clods of dirt onto my head and shoulders. A faint whimper came from above, and Edric plopped into the hole beside me. The moment he landed, he shoved me back against the side of the depression and held me there, all the while looking as though he would like to disappear straight into the soil. There was a deafening thud, and something blew hot air reeking of brimstone into our hole. Frogs! Grated a voice, sounding so disappointed that I almost spoke up. Edric must have sensed this, for he clapped his hand over my mouth until the creature took off, with a great flapping of leathery wings that sent leaves and other debris swirling down around us. What was that? I whispered once the sound had grown too faint to hear. A dragon, Edric breathed. I didn't know there were any around here. Why, if I had my sword, you wouldn't be able to lift it. You're a frog, remember? Oh, yeah, but as soon as I'm human again, uh-huh, I said, finding it hard to believe that Edric would ever face a dragon in any form, whether he had a sword or not. Come on, we have to get out of here if we're going to get changed back. Jumping out of the hole was easy, but we'd gotten turned around, and it took us a few minutes to find our original heading. The trees seemed to have moved as well, but we finally found our footprints and determined which direction we'd been going before. We also figured out what had made the hole. It looked like a giant footprint. Giants and dragons, Edric said, grinning from eardrum to eardrum. I really will have to come back here with my sword. All right, I said, whatever you say. I began to notice other prints after that, like the enormous marks of a griffin's talons and paw. We saw additional signs of a dragon as well, for some of the trees were singed and the bark had been rubbed off others. Sensitive to the forest now, I saw shadows where there was sound but no substance, flickering lights where there should have been none, but nothing else came to bother us. If we had passed through this forest in the witch's bag, it was just as well that we had done it in ignorance. We had both been complaining of thirst for some time when we finally came across a pool of water. Although sheltered by the canopy of ancient interlocking branches, the water sparkled invitingly, as if laying in the direct rays of a brightly shining sun. What are you waiting for? Edric asked when I hesitated. It looks clean enough. Maybe so, but what do we really know about it? It could be enchanted or even poisoned. I'm not sure.